Well, that's actually the point. That's actually the point, because as I mentioned, I alluded to that yesterday, but I'll mention that there are some of the people who have made breakthrough in life, whether it was Mr. Jamshedji Tata or Vikram Sarabhai or whosoever you think about, they had one or the other passion where they involved use of their hands, even if it was, if nothing else, playing piano. Tata was a carpenter. In fact, a biblical character, I don't know how many of you know about St. Thomas, was a carpenter. This book, written by Lloyd C. Douglas, based on the disciple who in fact came to India, isn't it? He was the saint who had touched Christ and who came to India first. Much later it spread in Europe. So many thinkers have had this great ability, and I want to recall what we discussed yesterday about different hands. And if you notice, there isn't a great deal of variation which is emerging here as this variation that you can see here. So it is this ability, and we will see further about that. So what did it mean? It meant that you can hold the tools in a manner that you couldn't do that before. So you can use them to shape the wood, to hold that stone, make a wedge there, for a whole range of operations. If you carefully see how this thumb is helping you to use different tools, it is the most remarkable feature in the human evolution. And it is pity if it is only used on keyboard. Because on keyboard you are using like this, but you are not holding things, you are not pushing things, you are not twisting things, you are not pulling things. So large part of the brain, my first thesis today is, which has evolved in the evolutionary history of millions of years, remains underutilized. So as you mentioned yesterday about tail, we lost our tail because we didn't use it. We will lose our brain if we don't use it. So it's a wake-up call. It's a wake-up call. हमको अभी सोचना पड़ेगा. We have to think about it. That if there is a huge part of the brain evolved to process signals from hand, and if we are not using our hands, then will nature let us retain that part of the brain indefinitely? Maybe what I am talking about may happen another 1,000, 2,000, 5,000 years. That's possible, 10,000 years maybe. But there is no harm in thinking about ahead, isn't it? There is no harm. We should think about, if our forefathers, great explorers had not thought about using hands with these tools, we wouldn't have these tools today. So they did it 50,000 years ago. So there is no reason why we should not think of next at least 5,000 years ago, 5,000 years later. And I am worried about this fact that if we do not use our hands imaginatively, physically, Gandhi had an intuitive understanding of this. When he developed the Bunyadi Shiksha, Bunyadi Talim, and he said, look, we must work with mind but also with hand, and everybody must work with hands. उन्होंने कोई विकल्प नहीं दिया. He made it compulsory. He made it compulsory. He had an intuition. He didn't have this science knowledge of biology or neurobiology, but he had an understanding that there is something which hand does to the mind, to the brain, which cannot be done by any other way. No matter how much we reflect, and how much we read, and how much we analyze, and how much we abstract, the part of the brain which receives signal only when you move these hands and use them in a forceful manner, I'll show you some muscles. You will see what I'm trying to say. I mean, this is an observation about how convergence takes place when you are observing something. Now, one person is doing the thing, but other people are observing. This must have happened thousands of years ago. It's also happening now, not enough. Today, if somebody looks at your shoulder and look at your screen, you close it. Immediately we close it, right? We don't want our email account to be seen by anybody else. We are preventing people to pore over an object and converge attention to something together. In medical science, they still do that. When they do dissection, when they do operations, when they do surgeries, they do that. In which other science we do that? You understand the point? Unless we all focus our attention on something which is happening and observe carefully. An old time apprentice principle. We don't see things. We don't see things. There are certain things for which language is not there. A surgeon cannot narrate how he is operating. You have to operate it. You have to observe it. In other words, certain things cannot be learned without being there. We cannot learn that. There is no amount of knowledge which can abstract and transmit the same experience that a doer is facing. जो कर रहा है, उसको जो दिख रहा है, उसको जो महसूस हो रहा है, वो उसको कह नहीं सकता. उसके लिए वहीं पर उसी क्षण हमको अपना ध्यान देना होगा. We will have to focus our energy right then, at that moment, and observe. You ask a lady to write the recipe. She will tell you. But is that the way it works? It doesn't work that way. There is a way in which she weighs things with fingers without a balance in hand, and sometimes she gets a feeling there, and then she puts another little bit of grains and put a little bit of pepper there. She then negotiates and says, well, maybe this time I'm making for 4 people, maybe a little bit more. And this approximation goes on. How do you transmit this into a sequence? We didn't have written recipes. And mind you, since I will bring gender issue every day, in a home, if you make a dish, your mother makes it, your sister makes it, your bhabhi makes it, you can make out. Isn't it? In other words, there is a signature on the creation, the dish, and it is consistent. So if same dal, same curry, made by my aunt, my mother, my sister, I can feel it. Tell me one thing, tell me any other art, any other field of knowledge where a person's personality is imprinted every day in every creation. There isn't another example of this kind. It's almost like a painter whose painting you can see from the style that the painter follows. So do we call cooking as a painting? We don't, but it is. It's like painting. We have not thought through this. We have not thought through this. We have not thought through this. In chemical terms, it has material, it has proportion, it has sequence, it has duration, and that's what chemistry is all about. So it is also a chemical formulation, but it is also an artwork. No two ladies will make the same dish alike, never. Can we say that? The men can say that about anything? We can't. Can we say that? Very difficult. In fact, the growth of professionalism meant that death of individualism. The more professional we are, the less individualistic we should be. Isn't it? In an organization, when we create systems, we say, look, we can't create systems for each individual. Why can't we do that? If individual is a creative person, then why can't we create organizations which will help express the talent of each individual? Why can't we do that? We ought to do that. So this is a part of the brain which is receiving signals, and we are trying to see now the point that I made yesterday. Now there is a biological basis of that point. We said yesterday that because women did not use their relaxed time to keep their hands like this or like this, they were using them all the time for knitting, for weaving, for breaking seeds or whatever. It meant that there were some different kind of synapses which were built in the brain. Now I am just trying to show how those synapses were built. So if you look at the part of the brain where naming, reading, grammar, verbal memory, word list, these are all basically from cognition, words. And then when you superimpose on it the parts where the movements come from the hands, you begin to see why when they use their brain, they are calling different parts of the brain for the same action for which we are using our brain. In other words, there is a different stimuli which is getting activated in the brain when women are talking about a conceptual picture than when men are talking about. And this must be accepted as a way one has trained. Now it can be changed in next maybe 1,000 years, 2,000 years, if we reduce the division of labor and try to make sure that everybody does that. But that also means that men can also acquire some of the feminine ways of thinking and become more intuitive. So it is not a project where we are talking about women losing their intuitiveness. We are also talking about men gaining the intuitiveness. And if we become more intuitive, probably we will also become more receptive and more, we will be able to listen more, absorb more, assimilate more, and therefore think little slowly, not as fast. Today there is a lot of premium on thinking fast, right? We consider someone who thinks slowly as dumb person. There is no reason to define intelligence in terms of only ability to think. Certain functions may require that, but certain functions require a little more weight, little more reflection. And many of the toughest choices that human civilization faces actually require a lot of reflection. And we have no patience for that. So, for example, I have a weak short-term memory. I can't remember names of the people who I have met recently. I remember everything which happened 40, 50 years ago, but I have difficulty in my near-term memory, particularly with names. So this is the part of brain which is not behaving very well in my system. But point is that this part of the brain, frontal lobe, is also for perception of the words. So I, for example, when I write D, I always write TEH. I have not learned to write THE. My text always will have TEH. I couldn't train myself to write THE. There's no possibility. I think but I write TH because there is some wiring problem in the brain, which is mild dyslexia maybe. This is very interesting. So if you look at 200,000 years old history that we had began yesterday, we said about 200,000 Homo sapiens emerged about 200,000 years ago. And if we look at how did things begin, then this is the cycle, this is the sequence, how the differentiation started, little, hand, wrist, forearm, all of that. And let me come to this point now. Yesterday we discussed how variability is reduced through pattern recognition, isn't it? I would like to reflect on that a little bit more. How human societies develop ways of pattern recognition